sewing friends. Today's project is one I've been looking forward to. If you saw my haul before the end of last year, so in December, I had a big pattern haul, and this is one of the patterns that was in there. And then last week you probably saw my fabric haul. So I've been thinking about this for quite a few weeks. Today we're going to work on Vogue 1886. I actually ordered 2 different fabrics for this pattern, but I'm going to definitely be only sewing up one today. So let me show you the one we're not going to be working with, and it's this. Isn't that crazy? I ordered it just because it had such a vintage mod look, and to me it really matched the pattern. Now, my original idea for this design is I wanted to do this in like a really soft matte crepe and maybe outline in a fine satin just the outer edges of that fun sleeve. I really struggled in finding what I was looking for, however. I don't know why, but it's not out there. I do own a beautiful navy crepe that I've been kind of hanging on to for something. If I like this, this is going to be made into that navy crepe. But this is my practice. This is to see if I even like the pattern and how it looks on my body. So let me show you the fabric we will be sewing with. It is this, and I chose this because of this stripe. I like the uneven stripe, the floral on it, and I can make the stripe go up and down. I'm hoping, now I'm cutting cross grain, so I'm going to be turning this and cutting it so you can see the selvage down there. The stripe is meant to go across the body, but I don't want the stripe across my body. I want it up and down. I do not want horizontal, I want vertical. So we'll see how it goes. It's 60 inches wide, I have 5 yards. I got this on Amazon. If you saw my haul, I got this for under $22 for all 5 yards. So that's why I'm using this, because it's an inexpensive way to try a pattern and see if I like it. Now, I did have to do a few little alterations. This is a Vogue pattern, and because of how this sleeve piece that's sewn in is, it goes all the way to the hemline. So if you do any alterations to the length in the main body, you also have to do it to the sleeve. So I have done that, and I'll show you how I did those alterations right now. When working with this pattern, it's so long, this is my front panel, that it doesn't all fit on the pattern paper. It has this little thing at the bottom. Can you see all those little dots? And this is pattern piece 1. This is pattern piece 1A. And you line them up on top of each other, get them all lined up perfectly, and tape it down. See that? And that is how this works. Now, that's great, except mine's too long. I need to lose 3 inches. So, and it has a length and shorten line depending on where you need it. I don't need it. I'm not short-waisted. Like if it was just too long in the waistline, it shows where the bust and the waist are. It has a length and shorten line for that. For me, I just need to lose it at the hemline. So I've come up here, and from this little line here, I've measured up 3 inches. That's how much I want to reduce it. And I'm going to now line up those little lines on that 3-inch mark, and make sure you get your center front lined up perfectly. And I'm going to tape it down, and you can see how it's off just a little bit. And then I'll true up this line right here. I'm going to do that for the front and the back. Since I'm shortening it, I also have to do that for the sleeve, but I have to do it at the actual length and shorten line, because if I do it on this part, it's going to change the way the sleeve falls, and it's not going to look very pretty. I've taped on my extension for the sleeve, and up here, I haven't trimmed away my excess paper on purpose because I want to use it for truing up. So I've just extended this length and shorten line out so I can cut on it. And I'm going to use the extra length of the paper if I need it for truing up. And it's really important when you do this that you have these lines crossing each other. So you have something to keep you on track so you don't get your sleeve back together crooked. Now it's in 2 parts. Now if I did not have this line to line me back up, it would be real easy to get this off up here. So I'm going to mark my 3 inches. Now I can use this. I want to keep it perfectly straight, so I'm going to make sure I keep my arrow on top of each other. I'm going to line it back up and tape it back down. And can you see how off these are? That's where we're going to true up. I'm going to start in the middle here to make sure I keep it straight. Okay, so I'm going to use my straight edge to start with. And I want to kind of divide it in half. So this is an 18-inch rule, and I want to kind of go around the 9-inch line for the middle to line this up. And you can see right in the middle, that's where it is. What I want to do is I want to divide this in half. So I'm going to gain a little bit on this side and lose a little bit on that side, which is about right here. So I can kind of curve this back in to where I'm going. And it will keep my sort of the shape of this fluttery little sleeve, because we sure don't want to straighten it out. I'm just darkening the line so you can kind of see what I did. So this is my new cutting edge, okay? And I'll do the same thing over here. I've done that so can you see right here? I haven't cut it off yet, but you can see it actually is divided. What I lost on this side, I gained on this side. It almost always works out that way. Same with this one. This one was much less. But what I lost here, I gained here. The last one we have to alter is the side piece. This is the side of the dress. And I've drawn from the length and shorten line at the bottom up 3 inches. I do not want to just take it off the bottom of the hem because I want the fullness of the hem. So this is going to take it out kind of in the knee area. So we can either cut it and move it up, or you can fold. Make sure you keep everything straight, but we can actually fold line to line like this and tape it together and then true up our edges. And you can see it's very, like over here it meets almost perfectly. On this side it's off almost 1/8 of an inch. So pretty easy way to alter, and I like where they stuck the options for lengthening and shortening. If you're lengthening, you're actually going to cut it, put your a piece of paper behind it, mark out how much you need to add. If you're really tall and you need to add 3 inches, cut it, have 2 lines that are 3 inches apart, and you put the top and the bottom on there. Don't forget to draw this line so that you keep them straight so you don't get a wonky side seam. Okay, so other than the alterations for the pattern, we're going to cut out, but you do need belting if you want to belt it. Now you could completely wear this just straight without a belt. I need a belt as a rule. It's just not as flattering on me without a little something. So I bought this cording, also was in the haul last week, and that's what I'm going to use for my belt. It does have little buttonholes. If you want to use the belt, there's little buttonholes that you sew in. So I have some knit interfacing for that. It has self-faced under the arms, so I may put a little interfacing in that area also. The neckline facing does not need it because it's almost treated like a bias the way they do it, so we don't have to worry about interfacing that area. So all of that said, we're ready to cut out. I'm starting to lay out. I pulled out my other cutting table for fabric support because there's 5 yards here, and I've folded back my first piece. This is my center front, and I was very conscious of where I wanted these stripes to be in the front, just to be flattering. So I've got the 2 widest stripes. It's 4 stripes, 2 on each side, going down the center front, and then it gets to a smaller stripe on the side. So I've got that one pinned on. It's only turned back that far. Then I folded the rest in half because I know I need 2 sleeves, 2 sides, and then I need a center back on the fold. So I just want to make sure I have plenty of fabric because I'm going to kind of cut my front and my back first, and then come back and cut these 2 that are on the fold, plus my 2 little facing pieces. But you can see I have loads of fabric. I have plenty, so I can kind of worry about my placement of my center front and center back on the pattern design to get it where I want it. I'm not as concerned about the sleeve and the side pieces. Just so you can kind of see how I'm doing it, because I am cutting cross grain. Here's my selvage, so normally you would be cutting this direction. This is a knit. It's a very stable knit, so I'm not real worried about it being stretchy going the wrong direction. I need to say, if you're taller than I am, I'm about 5'5", cutting on a 60-inch length won't work because I reduced this by 3 inches for it to fit me. So if you're really tall, it won't fit on the cross grain. Only works for people like my height, 5'6" and under, probably. Still cutting out. Make sure you watch your grain line. It's really easy on this because I do have a stripe to line up with. So that's what I'm using to line up with my grain line. But if not, make sure you're measuring from your selvage over to get things straight, because it will affect how this sleeve falls and how it hangs on the body. I'm cutting my last piece. As you can see, I've been pinning and rolling to get it all on here. Crazy camera angle, but I want you to be able to see what I'm working on more than seeing me. We're going to start by marking our buttonhole and reinforcing that area. So this is what we're going to do. So here's my buttonhole. I'm going to mark, putting a pin straight through. I have this with the right side up, so when I open this up, right side of my fabric, it's folded in half. I've stuck the pins through each end of the buttonhole marking, so I can lift this up, and right where the pin goes in, I'm just going to put a tiny little dot. Now this is on the white part of my fabric, so I'm going to be real careful not to use anything that's going to not come out or be difficult. I don't want anything that's going to give me issues. So now I have my little dots on the wrong side. That's so that I know where to put my interfacing and stuff. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark on the right side also, just the tiniest dot, and this is for me to know where to make the actual holes, because when you do buttonholes, you do them on the right side. So this way, I'm lined up perfectly, and we're ready to go. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can pull this out. I have cut a piece of fabric from my fabric where I have big white circles or big white areas, so I'm going to cut out the white. This is going to just be put behind it as more stabilizing, behind the buttonhole. And I'm doing this because I don't want the black to shadow through. If you have a fabric that's really sheer, you could use a different fabric even. Like I could have used white batiste or something like that. So now that I've done that, I'm going to do the same thing with a little piece of interfacing. Here's my interfacing. And I just need 2 little squares. They just need to be a little bit bigger than the buttonhole is going to be. Now I'm ready to put it all together. Now I can open this up and I can see where my little dots are. And I can lay this face down on top of that. And then I have my white little piece of fabric that can also go on top of that. So I'm going to fuse this first. Then I'll pin this on top of it. I will trim down this after the buttonhole's made. But now, after doing all that, I will be able to come back and then just sew the buttonholes in. So all this prep work really matters, because this is going to get a lot of tension with the little belt that's going to pull through here if you're doing the belt. If you don't want a belt at all, you can completely skip this step. If you think you might want a belt, I would go ahead and do this because it's not going to be fun at all to do it once the garment's put together. Make sure you put sticky side down. I'm tapping it on first to make sure it sticks good because it's so small. You can see me in the camera in my iron, and that's it. Now don't lift it up right away. Whenever you fuse something on, you want it to kind of sit and dry for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and lay this on top and put a couple pins in it to hold it in place. I'm going to move these pins to the other side when I lift it up, but at least it'll be held where I want it to for now. Okay, all that prep work, we're ready for buttonhole. All right, I'm ready for the buttonhole. I've got my machine set up. I'm going to go, or that is, I've got the foot on. This is my buttonhole foot. I'm going to choose buttonhole on my machine. This foot, and every machine's different, but for me, this foot will memorize it. So after I've done the first one, when I go to the second one, it will automatically make it exactly the same size. So once, all I have to do on mine is I've got the foot lined up right over my top marking for my buttonhole. I've got my foot control down here and my fuzzy slippers on, and I'm going to just push. It does what's known as a 6-step buttonhole, so it's going to sew the first line down, and when I get to the bottom where I want it to be, I'm going to hit my reverse button. And it does the rest for me. Including stop. And that's my first little buttonhole. Now I'm going to come over and do the other one. Exact same way. I've got my thing all lined up with all my layers. And I'm taking my pins out because I don't want the pins getting caught under the foot. Because this has an eye, and this piece down here is low enough it could catch on the head of a pin if it were very big. And this time I don't have to hit the reverse button. This time I just have to let it go. And buttonholes are done. So now that the buttonhole is done, there's my little buttonholes. And I'm going to come back and trim around this. I don't want this big piece hanging out. I don't want that much left over behind it. But that's done. The next thing on our directions, I think I'm going to move the camera. It's just a weird angle. We've done step 1, which is our buttonholes, and step 2. So now we're going to go ahead and just sew it together at the shoulder seams front and back. Pretty easy. Now, if you're using a woven that frays, you're going to need to think about what you want to do for your seam finish. You could do a mock French seam, you could do a French seam, you could overlock those seam finishes, you could zigzag those seam edges. Mine does not fray at all. I could do nothing and it would be perfectly fine. However, I don't like an unfinished seam, so I'm going to go ahead and just straight stitch it together and look at it and see how much it shadows through and decide if I want to do anything, because one thing about not finishing your seam, if you don't need to, is they're softer and flatter, which may be what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that together really quick. I'm going to change my feet. If you've not seen how the feet go on this, there's a lever back here on these. It's the neatest thing, and I just lift up the lever. I use my knee lift to raise up that lever, and then this just pops right off. And then I can slide this right on, hit the lever, and now the other foot is on. So easy. I love these easy feet. All right, let's put our front and our back together. So we're going to do a straight stitch, 5/8 of an inch. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end of your stitches. Make sure you take it off a buttonhole and go back to straight stitching. When you back stitch, it only needs to be 1 or 2. You don't need to back stitch a whole lot. It looks like this. So here's the front, here's the back, together at the shoulder. This really is like a column dress. It's just a straight dress, and the thing that makes it look like a caftan is actually an extra piece added in. Super interesting. I really like it. Okay, so now that it's done that, I'm going to just look at these seams, and I don't think I'm going to do any seam finish on this. I'm not going to worry about it. I will be doing the double hemming and that sort of thing, but I think I'm not going to worry about my side seams, etc., but I will press. So I'm going to go over to the iron real quick and give this a press. So important to press while you stitch. Press each seam as you make it. Will make your finished garment look much better. If you don't, it's always going to look a little frumpy and homemade. Giving a good press on those seams makes a difference. Now this is a polyester, and polyester can melt. It takes a lot, but you can do it. So you just have to make sure you have your iron set correctly, but it does take, it's just good sturdy fabric, and it's going to do fine. I'm already kind of excited about this. Okay, so now that we've got our shoulder seam, we're down to step 4, which is neck facing. We're going to sew our neck facing together at the shoulders, and then we're going to be turning up that outer edge and hemming it. If I have the ability to serge, so if I want to, I could overlock that whole outer edge. However, I know because of how they're having us do this, it's probably better to do the turn up and stitch. And the reason they have us do that is because once we sew it on and turn it, we're going to stitch it again over where we've turned in and basted, because I looked ahead. So that's coming on step 6. So we're going to go ahead and get that put together. I keep changing the camera angle on you, but it just looked funky and I didn't like it. So I've got my little tiny facings here. Normally I interface these, but because it's kind of getting treated almost like bias, and you could just, so you know, this could be trimmed in bias pretty easily. So I'm going to take my front to my back. They're both cut on the fold, and we're going to sew them together at the shoulder like this, and sew together this shoulder up here. And this is, yeah, we're just sewing 5/8 inch for now. And these should meet at the seam lines. You've got curves going like this. So back is going one way and the front's going the other. And where they meet perfectly is right at the 5/8 inch line. So when you're lining this up under your foot, look right at the needle at the 5/8 inch, and that's where the edges should come together. And that was the same for the other shoulder seam also. If you're sewing and you miss a spot that you backstitched, you can easily just put it back under the machine and sew in that little area again. It works the same, double stitching, back stitching, whatever, as long as you get it sewn. We're going to go ahead and press open this seam also. Make sure when you're sewing this that you don't get it twisted. Okay, so we're going to press both of these open, and then we're going to fold up the outer edge, the outside, not the where it's going to get sewed at the neck. We're going to fold that up 1/4 inch and baste it all the way around. We've got our little shoulders sewn together and pressed. I need to give them a haircut. But now we're going to take our iron, we're going to just fold this up 1/4 inch and press it on the outer edge. So if I lay this here like this, can you see inside edge, outside edge? So we're going to fold this up and press it. If you put pins in to press with, make sure you don't press on those pins unless they're glass headed, because you will glue, you'll actually melt it right to your project. And this will not iron like cotton will iron and just stay. It'll be so lovely. This is going to leave a crease, but it's not going to fold over. It's just because of how it is. So I'm going to go ahead and put some pins in it. 2, if I were sewing this in a different fabric, a silk would probably press really nicely. You have to be careful with your silks because they water spot, but they sure do press nicely. So we're going to just do this and pin it in. When you're doing this outside curve, there's a little bit of easing to be done in here. If you're really struggling with that, run a basting line, no back stitching on a basting line, so a long, like a 4 millimeter, something like that, line along here, and then you can pull it gently as you go, and it'll tuck in that edge for you and make it easier. So if you're struggling a lot with this deep curve and getting it to fold in, run a basting line first to help you with that. All right, we're basting, which means you set your machine to a longer stitch. Depending on your machine, mine it's set up in millimeters. Set your machine to 4 or longer if you have it. Mine will go, I think, to 5. So I have mine set to like 4.2. Stitch length, you don't need to back stitch. This is a basting only. We're just trying to get that edge turned up and held in place to move on to the next part. So this is step 4 that we're doing right now. And so I'm just going to finish stitching around this neckline. Also be careful because this does have bias, especially in these curvy parts, and you can stretch it out, and then it's not going to lay pretty when you put it onto the garment. On these little shoulder seams, you're going to have some little edges that when you flip it over are hanging out, and I'm actually going to trim that back just to give myself a nice neat edge, and it'll lay prettier underneath the garment too. I'm a little concerned about where black areas fall behind white areas and if it's going to shadow through a lot, so we'll find out as we put it together. Hopefully it won't be too bad. I made my way around. I'm going to set my machine back to regular stitch length, which will be, it depends on you and what you like. You don't want a long stitch length to put your garment together because it will pull at the seams. It never looks as nice. But if it's too tight and you make a mistake, it's really hard to pull it back out. So I usually go with about a 3 in this stitch length. Every machine's going to be a little different, so you need to look and see what you want for yours. Now that I have this little tiny circle all put together, we're going to lay this right sides together on our garment. So get front to front and back to back. And we're going to line this up on the shoulder seams. We're going to stitch it at 5/8, but trim it down to 1/4 inch. We're going to trim away some of the excess. Of course we are, because we have got an inner curve that is smaller than our stitched curve. And once we trim back and turn, we're just going to have a little tiny bit left, which is what we just sewed, and that's going to get flipped around to the other side, stitched. It's going to look real pretty. It's going to look nice. and it finishes it off. So it works a lot like a bias would. I am pinning both sides of my seams just so that the seam does not flip around. Someday I would love to have double cameras because I use my phone for most close-ups and then this for the wider shots. But someday I'd like to have a second camera where I could have one stationary setup kind of close in here and then the other one out, and I could be filming simultaneously. Oh, I would love that. I think it would make videos for you guys a lot nicer. So maybe someday, maybe not. Because I will just tell you, the filming is the hardest part of the sewing for me. Sewing is the easy part, filming not so much. And we're sewing a circle. So with the circle, you can either backstitch or sew over where you start. So since you're sewing in a complete circle, you sew wherever you start, you just sew all the way around and cross those stitches when you come back. So here's my little facing getting pinned in. Now don't start sewing till you get it pinned all the way in because you could get your facing's going to want to move a little bit. This is sort of a long seam that we're going to be stitching. If you just start stitching without pinning it all down, it's going to shift on you and it could make the neckline hang wonky. I really think I would like to make this in a crepe and use satin bias to trim the sleeve outer edge like a real wide bias, and then trim the neckline in a bias where it could be seen, have a delicate little bias neckline. I think that would be very pretty. We are sewing. I'm starting at a shoulder, and you know if you turned up too much or too little, if your stitching line crosses over where you turned up, you know that you've turned up too much on this outer edge. It should be next to it, but not on it. I'm pulling out my pins as I go, you'll notice. And that's because it's better to not sew over a pin. Pins do shatter, and so do needles. And if you're not wearing eye protection, you can end up with needle shards in your eyeballs. We are sewn all the way around, and we're going to come in now and trim. It says to 1/4 inch. What's going to happen is this is all going to get flipped around and top stitched, and we need to get rid of all of this excess in here. This is what you want to avoid. See how I have a little fold over? I need to fix that. Sometimes it'll just pull right out because I just barely caught a little edge, so it there. Perfect. Okay, you don't want that fold over when we get ready to do the next part. We're going to come in here with our scissors and we're going to trim up to the stitching line. See our stitching line right here? And it says about 1/4 inch is what we're going to leave in here. And we're going to start cutting away. You don't want to cross your stitching line. We're going to do that all the way around to get rid of all this excess, so that when we're done, this is going to fold to the inside. Here's our inside. See that edge that we finished? And this is the other edge, and then we're going to top stitch that down through here. So we're going to do some more top stitching through all of these layers, and that will finish off our pretty little neckline. And here, see I have this excess, I'm going to trim off that just to make it smoother on the inside so it's not too bulky in that seam, because right here at these shoulder seams, when we fold this over, there's a lot. See all those layers? All those layers are going to be caught up inside that when we stitch it. So let's look at this deep curve of the back here. And it has this really deep curve. And when we go to turn this and stitch it, you may get some buckling in here from this edge, because this edge is still, if you have see mine's knit, and it's soft, but if yours is a little more stable, it may give you some issues. And if it does, just in this back part where it's real curvy, you may need to come in and do a couple little nips to, but not through that stitching line, and that will release that curve so that it will roll over better. And this is really just in the bottom of the neckline in the back is where you might need it. I don't need it, but I'm going to show you to make it easier for you. So now that we've got everything trimmed away, we're going to fold everything back and put pins in it so we can top stitch this down. Okay, and now we're ready to top stitch this, which is number 6. We're on to step number 6. All right, I'm pinning down my facing, getting ready to stitch it again. We'll be stitching it about 1/4 inch. And one of the things I always do on a facing like this is that I make sure and I roll it to the back so that, can you see how I can see just a tiny bit of the front on the back side? And what that does is that makes sure the front side looks perfectly smooth and that we don't have any of the facing peeking around. So I always roll it just slightly over, just over roll just the tiniest bit, like less than 1/8 of an inch, just to get all of the facing to the back and a tiny hint of that front to the back. And when you stitch it then, you won't have any facing peeking out to the right side. We don't want that. I have my facing turned and pinned all the way around and I'm ready to top stitch. They show you top stitching it with the wrong side up, or the inside up. So here you can see the wrong side of my garment. Here's the inside of my facing. You could definitely stitch it the other way around. If you do, you have to make sure that you don't fall off your facing and that you're catching your facing correctly. It's really important to keep this equidistant from the outer edge so that your facing top stitching doesn't do a lot of waving. So be careful, all of those things. If your machine makes a remarkably better stitch on one side than the other, like the top looks a lot better than the bottom, then make sure you always stitch with the top on the right side so that your garment just looks better when you're done. Just means you have to be more careful. Mine looks almost identical. It makes a good stitch, so I don't have to worry about it as much. And I'm also starting at the shoulder. Starting and stopping at the shoulder on this. I don't want to start in the very front or the very back where the seams are going to, where the stitches will cross over, because it's just not going to look as pretty. And I just fell off the edge after I told you not to do it. One of my biggest concerns is I've got black and whites and I'm stitching in white thread, so wherever the white crosses the black, if you make a mistake, it's going to be really noticeable. So you have to be cautious if you have a multicolored fabric like that and you're stitching in an opposing color. Be careful not to stretch your neckline when doing this too. There's a lot of bias in this neckline. It would be easy to stretch it out. Okay, now I have a couple bobbles. I need to go and unsew. One is right here. Now I'm ready to give this a nice press. So there's our front neckline, and there's our back neckline. All right, so we are now up to 7. We're ready for sleeves. We're going to take our 2 sleeves and we're going to sew them together at the shoulder. So we're going to have, I think I need to go cut out another sleeve set. I think I only cut out 1 set of sleeves instead of 2 sets. I don't have enough sleeves. It just hit me. I'll be right back. Okay, I only cut out 1 set of sleeves because I'm a goof. It says cut 4. I cut 2, so I ran and cut the other 2. I'm going to go ahead and sew the sleeve together at the shoulder for both of them, and then I may have to quit because in between that I actually ran a bunch of errands and it's already getting kind of late. So we'll see how fast. If I had planned this better, this would have gone straight through, easy sew, but life happens in the middle sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and do the shoulder seams, and then we'll see where we're at in the day because it's getting late. Are hemming, which means we are we're on step 7. We've done the shoulder and we're doing this, and it says turn in seam allowance along unnotched edge. The notched edge is going to get sewn to the garment. The unnotched edge, which is actually a little bit curvier and there's a slope to the sleeve, that's the one we're going to hem. So on the unnotched edge, we're going to fold it twice, and this is how I'm doing it. I'm going to roll it once and stitch it, roll it 1/4 inch and stitch it, and then I'm going to come back and roll it again. And you can see that when you do this, see that end? You're going to have a weird end down here, and that's just normal. That's just how it is when you have a pointy end. And then we will come back and true that up and trim it, because you can see how that's going to get. As you're doing this, Be careful not to, this got some bias in it, and I'm doing knit on top of that. So be careful not to stretch this so you get an unnatural wave. You could roll hem this on the serger, do a serged rolled hem. I personally don't like the look as well. You could actually lettuce it where you pull and roll hem it, and that gives you that pretty fluttered edge, which would work on a knit like this. It may work if you on some other fabrics, but I would practice first before doing it on your permanent one. So this is how it looks with the first stitch, and then we're going to fold it over again and stitch it one more time. I'm stitching on the wrong side. Right here, can you see these little edges that stick out? I'm going to trim those off just to make it a little slimmer inside there and not too bulky. So just watch as you're doing this that you don't end up getting pulling this and getting sort of lettucing along that edge. Okay, here is the second time through, so I'm turning over again. You can see here that's how it looks as I'm getting ready to turn it over. If you have a rolled hem foot that does a 1/4 inch rolled hem, go for it. On the wrong side, you can see 2 rows of stitching. On the right side, you only see 1, and you can see here's our corner where we've got it rolled up twice, and I'll actually trim off this excess when we're done, and that's going to be important when we're ready to add it to the side over here. So I'm still on sleeve 1, and that's where I'm going to finish today. So I'm going to do all the rest of both sleeves, and then I'm going to call it a day, and I'll see you tomorrow, and I'm going to look different because it's going to be a new day. All right, see you in the morning to finish this up. It'll be instantly for you guys. I hope I remember where I left off. Good morning. It's the next day, and I have these giant sleeves. Look at these things, and they're completely hemmed. I've done both of them, yes, hooray. So since I have 2 sleeves here without haircuts, all right, we're going to be starting with step 8, and we're going to take our dress that's sewn together at the shoulders, and it's really easy to tell the front from the back because the front has a high neckline and the back has a really low neckline. Can you see how low that is? So we're going to start at the shoulder, and we're going to take a sleeve, and hopefully you've marked all those notches, and we're going to line it up at the shoulder. We've got a right sleeve and a left sleeve, so we're going to start at the shoulder seam to shoulder seam, pin this together. It does not tell us where the point is supposed to end up on this sleeve. Our sleeve ends in a point, so I'm going to come down here to the other end, and it should be real close to the hem. What we want to happen is, okay, so we have this little end that is folded over, so the right side ends here, and we have this little point that's hanging off, which I probably could just trim off, but we know that this should end, our point should end right where the hem begins. Okay, so that's where I'm going to line mine up. I'm going to trim off this excess. Let me show you a close-up. So here's our little end of our sleeve where we've hemmed it, and can you see the seam right there? So that is what we're going to cut off. This is what it looks like when I'm filming with my handheld. Like that. So we're going to do that on all the little sleeve ends so that when we go to do this section, we don't have that excess hanging out there. So now I'm going to come down here. Don't, when you have a long seam like this to pin, that if you start at one end and work all the way to the other end, what happens is one side will be longer than the other. It's just the natural way it works. So you can, after you trim off that little excess, bring it all the way down, the point all the way down to the end of your fabric, like this, so that when we sew our 5/8 on both sides, yep, that will work. I'm looking at our directions. It does not really tell us. That's how we're going to do it because I'm looking at my measurements and it looks correct. So now that I've got it pinned at both ends, I can come back and pin a little from each direction, working towards the middle, and hopefully you will not get any stretch in there. This is going to be kind of time consuming to pin because we have, this is going on both sides of the dress, front and back. So this is the full length of the dress twice, and this is a full length dress. I'm pretty excited. After I get this on, I'm going to take it over the dress form real quick and just look and see how it lace. I actually slipped it over my head last night just looking at the stripe to see what it looks like. I like it. I love a dress, and I think I'm going to wear this around the house. Okay, I'm going to just keep pinning all of this together. Once it's totally pinned, I'll show you those little ends and we'll stitch it in. When you're pinning this long sleeve, remember you have notches. This is how I've cut my notches. I just do a little tiny snip in. See, that will help you line up. And there's also, can you see the little circles? Make sure you've transferred those because that's going to help you line up this coming up. Line up your sleeve onto the front and back with the notches and make sure you've transferred those other markings. This is how it looks at the hem where I'm pinning my sleeve on. I'm matching the point right there. When I sew this at 5/8 of an inch, it's going to look like this before hemming, and then there's a 5/8 inch hem included, so that should get the edge of this sleeve wing exactly on our hem if we hemmed this part right and line it up. If you're having any issues, or you can move it up a little bit, you could easily move this up and down. And I did trim off that little bit of extra on the bottom of my little points. I'm calling these sleeves wings. To sew these wings, I'm starting at the shoulder and sewing down, flipping over, shoulder down. You could start at one hem, go across the shoulder all the way to the other hem. You're more likely to have some extra movement by sewing such a long sleeves or such a long seam. So by chopping it up into two areas, also by sewing from shoulder down each direction, kind of causes even fabric movement, hopefully. I'm also using my even feed foot on my machine. If you have a walking foot, that would also work. Mine has a little built-in even feed. I know Bernina is not the only one that has that, so if you have that, I would engage it for these super long seams. It's going to make life better for you. So, shoulder seam, this is where I'm starting. This is a 5/8 inch seam, and we're just going to sew down. Our caftan has sleeves, wings. They really look like wings. And I did go slip it over my head. Now there's no side in it yet. If you were doing a true traditional caftan, it's sort of like this. It's sort of like a big rectangle with a head cut in the middle, or a hole for your head cut in the middle, and then you kind of sew up something under the arms, and there you go. So I'm going to hold this up so you can kind of see. Here it is sewn together. One of the reasons I wanted this fabric, can you see the seam? Can you tell where the seam is from the center front to the sleeve? I know you can't. It's right here. I like this fabric because it makes that disappear. Like, this fabric just hides all of that. It just looks like a continuous piece of fabric, which is one of the reasons when I was doing my picking out of fabrics, I chose it and I chose the other one. I'm going to throw in a picture right here of what I did on my computer when I was sort of conceptualizing this. Now, I do draw out garment designs a lot, or I have ideas and I will do a little sketching. I had it in my head. Even though I can picture it in my head, I really wanted to have a little something down on paper just for myself. I sometimes will put these in my day planner, or I keep a little book of ideas. Anyway, here's a picture of what I had in my head for all of you, so you can kind of see what I was thinking when I chose these fabrics. And it is pretty much exactly what I thought in my head. I love that. If you can't visualize, if that's not your thing, if your brain does not bend in that direction, it's not a big deal. You can easily hand draw out the line drawing and put in the design. You can merge the two. If you're computer savvy, you can take a picture of the fabric and merge it with your line drawing. Anyway, there are ways to help you if you struggle with visualization. Anyway, all that said, tangent aside, we're going to put in darts. Last piece to go on. So we're going to take this now. We need to make sure we've got all of our markings transferred. Now I'm going to, it does not call for this. You don't have to do this, but I want to. At the top of this pattern right here, where this self-facing turns down, I'm going to put a little knit interfacing in there. I'm just going to measure this and cut it and put it in there. I don't necessarily, I'm going to cut 2 pieces. There's a dart in there, and I just want it to kind of end at the dart. I don't want to have a lot of extra in there, just to give it a little more firmness. This is going underneath here. It attaches at the seam where the sleeve is. And what we want is for it to be stable. We don't want it to sag. And because I'm using a knit, or if you're using something soft like a georgette or a voile, whatever you might have chosen, it might be soft enough that it kind of sags under the arm, which is what I don't want. So I'm going to put a little stabilizer in there. It gives it a little bit of firmness under the arm, and we'll just make it stay where I want. So I'm going to put some interfacing in real quick. I'm going to transfer my markings, and then we'll do a dart. We're on our side panel. And we're going to come in and transfer all of our markings. I have it so that the wrong side is on the inside. So I have both layers here, making sure everything's lined up properly. We're going to transfer our dart markings. I have both layers, so I'm going to poke through the circles, and we're going to start at the top and work our way down. And you also want to transfer here on the side these markings. These are important up here. So I'm going to just open this up, so I can see both layers and my first pin, which is right here. And I'm going to make a tiny mark with my pencil on both areas. And that's my first one. And we're just going to work our way down to the next one. I'm marking right where the pin comes out. And then I'll take out that first pin and we'll go to the second marking. Now, if you've never done darts before, I have a little video on doing darts, and it shows all of this, and I'll put a link to it right now up in the iCard for you. So anyway, this is how I do I transfer my markings, even for the side seams or for the little side circles, all of those things. That's how we do them, transfer the markings. We are putting in darts, which is step 9. I have transferred all of my markings. I have so much static electricity. Transfer all of my markings, and I've added some lightweight knit interfacing to the top of this self-facing. So if you haven't done darts, I mentioned go check the little dart thing out. I've got mine lined up here ready for darts to go. The dart is the side seam. So if you are very curvy, this dart may not be enough. You may need to come in and deepen the curve a little bit for your figure. Now this is a column. That's really what it is. It's a column with wings. So you also may not care. You can just leave it how it is and let it just hang. If you are the opposite, if you're not curvy, or if let's say you don't curve in but you curve out, you may not want hardly any dart, or you may even want to leave the dart out and make it a true column. That's up to you, but that's what this dart is. The dart is where a side seam would have been, and it's looking so cute. I put it over there on my dress form. I slipped it over my head. It's exactly how I had it pictured in my brain. If you struggle with darts, draw the dart. Actually take your marking pencil and draw what you should be sewing right on your fabric and stitch right over those lines. This is a shaped dart. It's not going to be a true V. It's going to shape because it's making the shape of a body. You can also take it in more deeply. Like I'm really busty, so I don't need as much on the side because I have a fuller bust. But if you don't, if you need to take it in a little bit so it doesn't droop and sag on the side, make your dart a little deeper at the top. All right, so we have a shaped dart. It gives us a side seam. I love this fabric. It just hides all this. It hides all the stuff. Okay, I'm so glad I chose this for my practice with this pattern. And then that's going to fold down. That's going to be our underneath like that. So very easy. We're going to get both of those in, and then we're ready to, it's going to finish the edge. So let's talk about that really quick. So here's the one that I just did. Here's my dart. You could serge this edge. You could turn it under once and then and stitch it so that you have a finished edge. If yours is like mine where it doesn't fray or do anything, you could completely leave it alone. I think I will serge this edge, and I'm actually considering coming back and serging when we are putting the whole thing together and we're going to be sewing down that seam. I may serge that seam too. So I'm going to go ahead and serge that edge real quick just to make it neat, and because I added the interfacing, it will make the interfacing not want to come off in the wash if it has something sewn over it. So that's what I'm going to do for mine. Okay, after darts, I'll beat you back here in a minute. Let me finish these darts and we'll put our side panels on. Okay, we are looking at the side panel, Here's the dart. Now, mine is in a soft knit and it does not need to be opened up, but you may need to cut open this dart and sort of press it open if you're having problems with pulling, especially if you have a very deep dart. Like I may come in and make this a little deeper in the side. I kind of don't think I will, but if I wanted it more fitted, it might even need some clips in here. And if that's the case, you might need to seam finish this dart depending on the fabric you chose. The other thing I've done is I've turned down the facing to the marking and I've just done a little stitching to hold it in place. And that's it. Now you could come in with a hand stitch and stitch your dart there too to hold it in place, or you could do some top stitching. And since this has lots of top stitching already along the wings, along the sleeve, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a little top stitching under here too, just to make this firm and stay in place. The other thing you could do, if you're having lots of issues with this just being too big, you could easily run a piece of elastic inside here to make it pull in a little tighter and tuck against the body, which is another option if you find it saggy and you don't feel like it's fitting you the way you want it to. It's a good place to sneak in some elastic. We are on to step 11. We're putting our side panels on and we're going to start with the front of the garment. So lay this out so you can see the front, and we've pushed those sleevey wings to the inside. We're pinning on the sleeve side, however, so we want to make sure the sleeve is out of the way. Hopefully you've transferred your little markings. That first circle is this one right here, and that's where that folded edge is going to go. And you know you're doing it right. There's a front and a back to these side panels, so you want to make sure you get it correct. The next little circle, this shows us we're working on the front side. This is the front side of the side panel. That little circle will have that little circle is going to have a companion right here. So those two are going to get lined up. Then we're going to come down and we're going to find our notches, and we're going to line up the notches. See these notches? Well, we have them on our side panel too. Here they are. So notches to notches, we're going to line those up and pin it, and then we'll be ready to pin at the hem, put any pins in between, and we'll have our sides done. So you're going to do that for both side fronts. Then we'll come back and do the back. The back does not have as many markings on it. So you're going to match at your notches, match at the hem, and then measure up. We're pinning the back now. Here's my shoulder seam, and this is all sleeve here. Here's my side panel pinned on, so you can see here's my front panel, here's my side panel, and the sleeve is sort of sandwiched in there. All that sleeve is just tucked on the inside. So now I'm coming to the other side. Here's my at the hem, matched at my notch, and I'm just pulling it up. So all of that sleeve, which is what they're showing here, that sleeve's all tucked down on the inside of this, and there's plenty of room. There's plenty of room for it. So the sleeves, this is sandwiched in there. That's what they're trying to show you. And then we'll just sew this all up and we're ready for hem. All right, I want to show you, I just sewed the side panel. I only have one side panel in. I want you to see how this fits on the body. So look, here's my side. Can you see the gappiness? Now I have this over my clothes and it's tight around the hip, but up here, it's loose. So I think I am going to either take a much deeper dart. What I actually think I'm going to do is I'm going to put an elastic in that. Like I mentioned to you, I'm going to put elastic in it. I'm glad I've only got one side in. I'm going to go ahead and add elastic to the other side for fit reasons. And then I'm going to serge that seam. So here's how I'm handling the elastic. So I've already sewn a casing. Wasn't intended to be a casing, it was supposed to just be the hem, but it's perfect for my 1-inch elastic. I've got a safety pin here, and I've cut it. This is how long it is. So it's about 4 inches smaller, 4 inches shorter than this. And I'm just going to fish it through. When I get this end even with this, I'm going to stitch it down. I'm going to fish through till it comes out over here and stitch it down over there. That's the panel that I have not pinned in yet. This panel is already pinned in. Here it is. So I'm going to take it loose right here only, do the same thing, fish the elastic through, re-sew it, and then I can serge. And let me just explain to you what I mean by serge. I'm going to come down here to the hem where all of these layers are together, and I'm just going to serge all 3 layers all the way around. And before you do that, if you choose to, check this little wing area right here. So here's my 3 layers all together, and here's my sleeve. Can you see how the sleeve ends right at the 5/8 inch, so that when I come back to hem this, the sleeve ends exactly at the hem perfectly. And serge the hem also before putting in the hem. So this is how it looks with the elastic in. You can see how stretchy it is, and it lays really pretty, and I think that'll look just fine, and it will stay up better, and I will feel more comfortable in it when I'm wearing it. All right, we have a dress. Everything is together. I have added, I'm going to open this so you can see past these big sleeves. Inside here, here is where I've added elastic to that side panel. This is the size before, this is the size width. I took out about 3-ish inches, which is right under the arm, which is where I needed it. Just tucks in a little better. I went ahead and serged these seams together on the inside, those 3 seams, so that looks nice. And I went ahead and did the overlock around the hemline also. That's all that's left is the hem. So I'm now going to turn up, there's a 5/8 inch hem allowed. I'm going to turn up the 5/8, stitch on the half, and it's together. The one thing I have not done yet is open my buttonhole, so I'm going to do that. And then I bought cording for my tie. I think I'm going to make it kind of a long tie, so you just have to decide how long you want it. You definitely could do a self tie out of scraps of your fabric if you want to. You could use there's lots of options for that, but I'm going to go ahead and cut my tie piece. All I'm going to do is tie the ends of my cord and probably put a little fray check or something on the end so my cord doesn't completely come undone. And I will go try it on and show you. I will tell you, when I tried it on a minute ago, I was getting Mrs. Roper from Three's Company vibes. That's what I was feeling. We'll see how it feels when I get the little tie on, but I had a real flashback there for a minute. So I'll see you in a minute after hemming and I fix my little tie, my belt tie together. When hemming, I'm hemming one panel at a time. So I did like the side panel and I pushed the sleeve out of the way and I sew up right to that. And then I will cut my threads, push my sleeve out of the way and start the next panel until I get to the sleeve, push that sleeve, stop there, push the sleeve out of the way, start again. So I'm doing each panel independently so you don't stitch down this sleevey wingy thing. Okay, I know I said I was kind of getting Mrs. Roper vibes, but how about Auntie Mame? Let's think Auntie Mame and go with loud and proud and maybe a little bit elegant. I really love it. This is the most comfy, easy thing to wear. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me show you. Okay. This would look so nice in a beautiful ethnic print. Couldn't you see this in one of those lovely batiks and one of those African prints? Gals, make it. Show me. Show me. I want to see this made up. This is so easy to wear and so comfy. I'm glad I made it knit. Boy, this just feels like, I mean, I've got these great big wings out here, but it's easy as can be to wear. Now, it's low back. It's just about right where my bra hits for me. But, wow. Okay. Was not very hard to sew at all. I'm glad that I added the little bit of elastic under here. You can still see there's definitely bra showing. You would never really show because these wings definitely keep you covered. I'm going to call them wings from here on out. It does feel more secure. I don't even know how to pose in this thing. I just want to flap away. This is so easy to wear. Okay, definitely. I don't know that I'd ever wear this. Great for vacation. I could see wearing this on a vacation. I would really like to make this in an elegant crepe with maybe some beadwork or a fine satin, a charmeuse trim, something like that. It could be very elegant. It would be great for mother of the bride, for evening. Great entertaining at home type garment though, because it's so comfy. Except, I don't know, I don't think I'd want to cook with these sleeves. I could see dragging it through the charcuterie board and clearing the table, or maybe catching it on fire on my stove. And of course, a good shoe always makes it better. wide, big neck tends to want to slide off. And I could see doing some of those little bra snaps that you put in the shoulder seams that kind of hold the garment on the strap of your bra and keep it from going anywhere. And I could see maybe doing something like that. If you were going to wear this out, like if I were going to go out for dinner in it, you're going to be in public and moving around, getting in and out of a car, that sort of thing. See you next week for another fun video.